The offseason is officially upon us, and that leads to plenty of speculation about what the Seahawks are going to do over the next couple of months in free agency and the draft. What could be some bold hot takes that end up coming up this offseason? We're going to be dishing out our thoughts, plus our listeners here on our Blue Friday edition of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Glad to be joined on this Blue Friday show by my co-host, Nick Lee. And a special thanks to all the 12s who are listening in, whether you're in Spokane, Washington, or Sacramento, California. We greatly appreciate each and every one of you for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We are nearing the end of Senior Bowl week. The East-West Shrine Bowl was last night. With that, Nick and I are going to have our first dueling mock drafts of the 2025 offseason. We'll be breaking down all those selections coming up here on this Blue Friday edition of Locked On Seahawks that is brought your way courtesy of our friends over at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Now for your lead story here on our Blue Friday edition of Locked On Seahawks. We are at the time of year now, Nick. You obviously have a 2-week break till the Super Bowl. The Pro Bowl's going on, whatever the Pro Bowl is these days, glorified dodgeball and all the events they've got going on. Then it starts to lend itself to speculation season across the NFL. 30 to 32 teams are done with the season. They are moving on to the draft, free agency, trade speculation. And with that, I started thinking about this. What are some takes that our fans have? If you've seen the picture with the guy that's got like 90 swords aimed at him, what is the take that you have that generates that kind of a response? And I will start this process off. And listen, I don't feel like this is a hot take, but there are a lot of Seahawks fans that when I posted this the other day were like, what are you talking about? That's exactly the reaction I expected. So I'm going to kick this process off here. My offseason hot take: if Ashton Jeanty falls to pick number 18, John Schneider should sprint to the podium to make the selection. Look, I understand running back is like the least of Seattle's concerns right now with Ken Walker III, Zach Charbonnet. Neither one of those guys is Ashton Jeanty. We've seen what Saquon Barkley has done to the Philadelphia Eagles. Ashton Jeanty's that kind of a talent. If he fell in their lap at 18, I'm rushing up there to make that selection. So that's my offseason hot take.
Well, first of all, put some respect on Flynn Rider from Tangled's name. That's the that's the guy in the meme. So with, I get he's probably best player available at 18 if he does fall that way. So if you're just looking strictly BPA, Jeanty's probably your guy. And yes, watching the Eagles, and like I always say, my brothers and my dad are big Eagles fans. They are on the Saquon Barkley train like you wouldn't believe. He has pretty much transcended that franchise. So yeah, that's tempting. I think if you do, I'm not gonna say this is crazy, because if you do go that route, obviously there would probably, in my opinion, would need to be a move off of Ken Walker, maybe recoup a pick or two to get him. Having 3 guys there with Jeanty, Walker, and Charbonnet, that's obviously a loaded, maybe it's overloaded running back room. Maybe you try to get some compensation to do that. So I'm not saying that's too crazy. Certainly you would have a few pitchforks pointed in your direction, that's for sure. So for mine isn't quite as spicy. In fact, it might not even be controversial. I'm sick of being in the middle. I'm sick of the 10-7 to 8-9, 9-8 range. Either or get off the pot with Geno Smith. Either I'm talking to the Seahawks, brass. Either you think he's a top 10 quarterback and pay him like it and go all in with trades and drafts to get him a loaded roster, or trade him or get rid of him and see where the chips fall with a new young quarterback. Go get a young quarterback in this draft that you believe in. And if that means maybe taking a step back in 2025 to kind of readjust and get that guy going, or perhaps find, in the 2026 quarterback class, which might be a little better. I'm sick of being in the middle. I think being in the middle of the NFL is purgatory. It's NFL purgatory is where the Seahawks have been, where it's just not good enough to quite make the playoffs and make a deep playoff run, but not bad enough to merit a top 10 pick. So I'm just really, really sick of being in the middle. So especially with Geno Smith, if you, the Seahawks brass, can believe that he is a guy that could get you to the Super Bowl, act like it, extend him, do everything you can to boost the O-line and just go all in with him in the next couple years, or get rid of him. I'm just sick of being in the middle.
Let's look at some listener hot takes, and this is what I've been so excited about this week. Our first one here, this one coming from Jason Yee on X. Take Emeka Egbuka or Malachi Starks there at 18, regardless of the line talent on the board, if available. So a receiver or a safety, Nick. And listen, I'm all in on Egbuka. I've already said if he's there and Seattle takes him, I'm not batting an eye because you're probably not going to have Tyler Lockett next season. You need to have another young receiver. And oh, by the way, Ohio State, we've already seen with Jack Smith and Jigba, they kick out great receivers pretty much every year in the first round. I think Egbuka is going to be the next one. And oh, by the way, he is a Pacific Northwest product as well. I think this one's going to generate a lot from you. Elston on X, trade Tariq Woolen. You'll get great draft comp in return, in Seattle as a GM that's good at finding corners all over the draft.
I mean, the last part of that take is not untrue. The Seahawks have had a good history with finding good defensive backs. Honestly, I think cornerback is a bigger need for Seattle than people realize. I don't think that the Seahawks are really at a luxury to be able to deal away Tariq Woolen right now. And also, like I mentioned last week, those physical traits, those just absolute raw tools that Tariq Woolen has, you can't order that on Amazon. Those don't grow on trees. Like, that's not something that just any old corner in the draft, even first round corners, possess. You have a rare physical talent in Tariq Woolen. Have you gotten the best out of that? Maybe not. But I'm not ready to kind of pull the plug on Tariq Woolen and just assume you're going to find a guy of that kind of ilk in this draft. I really am hesitant to do that.
Our next one here coming from Mark Goby on X. I think the Seahawks should use their first 2 draft picks on a big defensive tackle and a corner. So, Nick, this is agreeing with what you just said, that corner is a bigger need than advertised. But defensive tackle, that would be a huge surprise. But this is the way that I view the NFL. There's no such thing as too many good defensive linemen on your football team. And look, Jarran Reed's a free agent. If Seattle decides we're going to move on from that front, why not put 6'8", 340-pound Dajuan Walker up there with Leonard Williams and Byron Murphy II? I don't know. I'm intrigued by that idea. So that one to me is not necessarily a hot take. And there's a really good defensive lineman in this class, by the way. So you might want to take advantage of that. Our next one here, Eric Zimmerman on Blue Sky. Keep Geno and build the team around him. So this is kind of going with yours, Nick, but it's a more definitive. This is saying I don't want to see what it looks like on the other side of the coin. And a lot of fans don't agree with this. So to me, this is kind of a hot take. Like, look, I'm not only all in on Geno, I'm building around number 7.
And again, I'm not saying this is that's an incorrect take, because like I said, either do that or get rid of him. We don't need the whole play through his contract this year, another 9-8 season with a similar roster. No, go all in, I think, is the important part here.
No more 1 year speed dating.
Yeah, exactly. For me, going all in for me means big free agent signing along the offensive line, a splash pick or 2 on offense in the draft, and just keep building that defense. I think that could be a quality team. I just think this, you're right, speed dating with what we've had with Geno Smith and the team around him has been frustrating. So I'm not going to say this is, I'm not going to point my sword at Flynn Rider here on that one.
Our next one coming from DK is a Wookiee. Ironically, DK is a Wookiee is trading DK in this scenario. DK Metcalf and picks 50 and 82 to the Chargers for Quentin Johnston, Jr. Colson, and pick 22 and 55. Look, if the Seahawks are going to trade DK Metcalf, that would be the return that I would want, to be honest with you. And in that case, I don't know what the linebacker situation looks like. Does that mean Ernest Jones isn't on the roster? Now you've got Junior Colson and Tyrese Knight playing together. Or is this saying, Tyrese Knight, you had a good rookie year, but we're going to put a better young player in for you that has played already for McDonald at the college level? I don't know that trade is happening, but if Metcalf was going to move, I don't know that fans are going to be putting the daggers at Flynn Rider there on that particular example. Next one, Nick, I think you're going to enjoy this one. Conqueror on X, I would draft Tyler Warren at 18. That would give you the best blocking tight end and also a reliable pass catcher with the versatility to run as an H-back. Listen, this might have been viewed as a hot take a week and a half ago, but in Clint Kubiak's offense, I don't view it at all as that.
Yeah, I want to push back a little bit. I don't think he's like the best blocking tight end you can get in this draft. He's a fine blocking tight end, also as an elite weapon. I think he could be an absolute just talk about kind of a Devin Witherspoon for Mike McDonald, just putting him all over the place and kind of salivating at that. I could see Clint Kubiak doing that with Tyler Warren. That would be a lot of fun. I do think for me, it's just a little bit of like buying the Ferrari before you get the job. Like this is he would be a Ferrari of tight ends, but offensive line still needs fixed. Who's throwing to him after maybe this year? Things like those kind of questions I want to ask, because Tyler Warren, the player, I had a blast watching Tyler Warren this year. I'm not sure about the best blocking tight end thing, but I think that's a little bit of buying the clothes you want to fit into before you lose the weight kind of thing.
Real quick, we've got one more that I want to go through here, and this was the boldest one we got, and this is from Seahawk Boy Mike B on X. Draft Will Howard with the 18th pick. Listen, we've seen crazier things happen. Quarterbacks can rocket up draft boards. He just led Ohio State to a national championship, so from that standpoint, I don't think that this is the most insane hot take I've ever seen, but this would be a very surprising one if that's the QB that the Seahawks went with at pick number 18. I think there's a few other guys in that day 2, day 3 range that could rise up. I don't know that Will Howard's the guy that's going to do that, but this is draft season and crazy things happen. If Seattle's going to pick a quarterback, maybe Will Howard's going to end up being the guy. When we come back, speaking of the draft, we've got our first dueling mock drafts of the offseason. We are going to be looking at the first 4 selections that we made. That'll be coming up next year on our Blue Friday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This episode is brought your way by Game Time. You shouldn't have to think about skipping a mortgage payment. When you want to buy tickets to your next big event, Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, comedy, music, and theater near you. They offer killer last-minute deals, all-in prices. You can see the views from your seat. And with their best price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. Recently, my wife and I were looking for tickets to see Disturbed and Seven Dust in Denver on the Game Time app. With Game Time picks, I was able to find amazing deals, and we could even see the view from our seat before buying. The super deal was particularly impressive, offering great seats at unbeatable prices. You can see the all-in pricing that shows the total cost up front as well, so no surprise fees at checkout. Game Time has deals on tickets right at the day of the event, and with the Game Time guarantee, you'll always get the best price to write your own memories. If you find tickets in the same section row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. What time is it? It's game time. Welcome back to the Blue Friday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm Corbin Smith. He's Nick Lee. A special thanks to all the 12s who are tuning in. And thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. It's finally that time of year. It's mock draft season. Look, when the Senior Bowl arrives, that's when the mock drafts start for me. I know there's a lot of fans that are doing them in August. I don't subscribe to that. I got too many other things going on. But this is the time of year that we start dishing out the mock drafts. Nick, you may have been doing them a little earlier than me because I know how you function with this, but I want to put this out there right now. As we're going through these first dueling mock drafts, you and I had a little bit different agenda here. We came up with our mock drafts separately without having discussion. With it being Senior Bowl week, I picked all Senior Bowl players. And look, it's not far-fetched. John Schneider loves picking Senior Bowl guys. So there may have been some players that were at pick 18 and pick 50 that I would have picked in other drafts, but they weren't Senior Bowl guys. And I know you picked just the best player available or the best fit. You just picked from the entire crop. So just to put that out there for people that want to throw a fit. That being said, I like my draft class a lot. So let's get into it, Nick. And I want to start with you because I think you have the more controversial first-round pick, to be honest, given the fact that Seattle just traded for Ernest Jones and they got Tyrese Knight.
Yeah, so this is I was doing the Pro Football Network, shout out Pro Football Network mock draft. So I wasn't like, picking, oh, this guy looks good in the first round. I was trying to stick with the system. Jalen Walker, and I know it says linebacker next to him. I kind of view him more as like a Hassan Reddick, more than like an off-ball linebacker. Yes, he has experience as an off-ball linebacker, but we don't know what we're going to get out of Uchenna Nwosu and Draymond Jones this year. Maybe a little bit different build, but I think he could be a true, maybe Darrell Taylor might be a better comp as far as, physical. But when watching Georgia football, like number 11 just jumps off the screen. Like watch both games from Georgia against Texas. He just beats that offensive line, which multiple Texas offensive linemen are going to be maybe first round picks.
Yeah.
And Walker was just beating him constantly. So if you're looking for a linebacker that maybe could be turned into a Micah Parsons or a Hassan Reddick type player, Jalen Walker is a fantastic football player. I don't envision him as an Ernest Jones, Tyrese Knight kind of linebacker. I see him a bit more as an edge rusher, hybrid kind of linebacker. But boy, putting him on the defense with Mike McDonald, that he had to be salivating. So this for me was a bit of a best player available, and I've had people picking. I've seen mock drafts from experts picking him in the top 12. So getting Jalen Walker at 18. He would be a true defensive weapon and double down on the defense getting that much better. I'm not saying I want to build the trenches. And I think this would be a pick that, even though it says linebacker, could be a build the trenches kind of pick with just an elite athlete getting after the passer.
And look, you mentioned this earlier. I think there is still a path where you can pay Geno Smith and you can draft a quarterback in the first round. There have been teams that have done this. Kansas City Chiefs. Green Bay Packers. There are teams that have successfully done this in the last 5 or 6 years that have gone out and they have spent money on their veteran quarterbacks and they have drafted a QB that they felt it was going to take a little bit of time for that guy to be ready. And I feel like most of the quarterbacks in this class fit that bill. And listen, I am saying this, I'm going to put a guarantee on it. Jackson Dart is going to get picked in the first round in April. I'm going that far now. He is going to get picked in the first round. The more film that I've watched, and I saw Ole Miss play a fair amount this year, so it's not like I didn't see some traits, but the more that I've watched this kid, he has a lot of traits that I think are extremely enticing, especially in an offense that's going to be predicated on taking shots. And so for me, Jackson Dart, that's that first pick for me at 18. And some people might say, oh, that's a reach. I don't know if he's going to be there when a Seahawks pick at 18. That's what I'm feeling at this point, talking with different sources around the league as well. He is clearly valued a lot more than what fans are valuing him. I even had one scout that I spoke with in the last couple of days that said he thinks he could see Jackson Dart getting picked before either Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward. And listen, Jaden Daniels was getting a lot of the same discussion last year, and it ended up happening. So now, I'm not saying that he's going to be a top 5 pick, but I would be stunned if he's not a first rounder. I think he's going to have a great combine. I think he's going to test really well. He's got a big arm. He is really athletic. He ran for over 550 yards each of the last 3 seasons. Look, Seattle's got to pick a young quarterback at some point. To me, Jackson Dart is the guy in this draft that I think they are going to have a chance potentially to get that'll be there. You can still give Geno Smith an extension that has it's front-loaded, so back-loaded would be different, but front-loaded, you can move him in a couple of years if you think Jackson Dart's ready to go. If Geno Smith lights it up, hey, cool. Now you've got a first-round pick that you can maybe move around if you want to. It gives you flexibility, but I went with the QB. As far as the second and third round, look, I'm sticking with the Ole Miss train because I love Mr. Princely. That's what I'm going to call him because I butcher his last name no matter what I do. I'm just going to call him the Uman, Princely Uman. And this guy is really electric off the edge. He might be a first rounder, but he's been inconsistent as a run defender. That said, the guy is just electric off the edge. He can mix in some speed to power. There's some developed counter moves there. So I'm going with some Rebels, and that's not crazy because I think Ole Miss could have 4 or 5 guys going in the first 2 rounds. If you get 2 of those players, to me, that is a big hit for the Seattle Seahawks. So I really like getting Jackson Dart and Princely Umanmielen. I always butcher his name. I like getting both those guys in the first 2 picks, and I think you get premium positions filled for the future.
And I know some people look at my first round pick and say, "Whoa, offensive line, you've been pounding the table." Here it comes for rounds 2 and 3. Donovan Jackson. In fact, there's been a few mock drafts where I've traded back in the first round, maybe like pick 30 or something, and I took Donovan Jackson. I think he's that good. I think he could kind of flirt with being a first rounder if things go right. Just with his versatility. I mean, he was a left guard by trade, and then he moved out to left tackle for Ohio State's championship run. They were kind of highlighting it during those last couple games, where just a selfless player, whatever you need, coach kind of guy, and he really just excelled at left tackle and left guard. So a guy that has experience in both positions, probably as a guard, if the Seahawks were going to draft him there, he would instantly legitimize the interior line. And he allowed 2 sacks in that first game as a starting left tackle, and then didn't allow a single sack the rest of the year. I mean, he only allowed 2 sacks all year. It was just that first start at left tackle against Penn State, who had a guy named, Abdul Carter.
So, it was incredible adapting by him.
It was amazing. So him at pick 50 there would be huge. And then I'm going to double down. And this is kind of like, I wish people would shut up about him. Gray Zabel,
that's kind of how I've been with Jackson Dart, to be honest with you.
Gray Zabel, I had him at pick 82. I don't think he's going to be there at 82. Gray Zabel is making some serious waves in the Senior Bowl out of North Dakota State.
He's got an awesome name, too.
He does. He has a great offensive line name, great North Dakota State kind of name. He's played every single offensive line position, Corbin. He specialized at both tackle spots, but he's even took 17 snaps at center. And in the Senior Bowl, he's taken snaps at all 3 interior line positions. Talk about versatility. I mean, he only allowed 2 quarterback hits and 453 pass blocking snaps this year. I mean, if you can put him anywhere on the offensive line, he's going to give you his best effort. I think he would be an absolute weapon to have along the interior. So getting Donovan Jackson and Gray Zabel day 2 for me instantly legitimizes your offensive line.
Yeah, as far as my other 2 picks in the first 4 selections, a lot of our listeners will be like, Corbin, where's the offensive line? Don't worry, I got it covered. And I know there's some Seahawks fans that may have reservations about picking another guard from LSU, but listen, Miles Frazier is a different style player than Damian Lewis or Anthony Bradford. This guy is a dancing bear. And what I mean by that, he's got really light feet. There's even been some teams that wanted to look at him as a tackle this week in the Senior Bowl. I want to keep him at guard. This guy was a phenomenal pass protector this year at LSU and last year as well. I mean, Jaden Daniels, part of the reason Jaden Daniels blew up in LSU, you could thank Miles Frazier. The guy is maybe the best pass protecting guard in this entire draft class. And I've seen enough good tape as a run blocker. I think he would fit well in a zone-centric offense. Clint Kubiak's going to be running that. I think Miles Frazier potentially could be a second-round pick, but third round seems like the sweet spot right now. So I picked him there. And then I went with a safety in the 4th round because, look, Kobe Bryant still has only 1 year left in his contract. And Seattle wants to use 3 safety looks. I don't know that Rayshon Jenkins is back next year. He could be a cap casualty. Lathan Ransom is one of those guys. He holds running backs at ransom. The dude comes up and just absolutely smacks people. I love the way that he plays the game in the box. He can play the 2 high at least, maybe some single high, but I think he's going to be best as kind of that interchangeable box safety that can play some 2 deep. He's physical. He's got good success as a pass rusher when they've used him in that front. I think in round 4 that you can get a guy that can play significant snaps for you as that third safety. And if you don't re-sign Kobe Bryant, he and Julian Love could be your safeties moving forward. It gives you flexibility.
And my 4th round is the time to take a swing with quarterback. Kyle McCord out of Syracuse. I know he's not, considered one of the more top prospects as far as quarterbacks go, but talk about a guy who led FBS in completions, led the FBS in passing yards. That also included an ACC record of almost 4,800 passing yards. He led the FBS in big-time throws per Pro Football Focus, which I think is kind of translates loosely into NFL caliber throws. The kid's got an arm, and obviously he probably wouldn't start week 1. Keep Geno Smith, keep Kyle McCord, kind of groom him, get him ready for the NFL. But it's time to take a swing on a young quarterback. I'm not even sure if he's going to be there at 137, but Kyle McCord is a guy I'm starting to fall in love with as far as, that second tier of quarterbacks.
When we come back, we're going to continue our mock drafts. We've got 5 more selections for the Seahawks apiece. We'll get to those up next here on our Blue Friday edition of Locked On Seahawks. The big game is almost here, and there's no better way to make it even more exciting than with Prize Picks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With over 10 million members and billions in winnings, Prize Picks makes it fun and simple to get in on the action. You pick more or less on at least 2-player projections, and if you're right, you could win up to 1,000 times your cash. Prize Picks even has a free pick for the big game where Patrick Mahomes only needs to throw for 1 yard to win. I don't know about your odds on that one. Pair that with one more correct pick and you're cashing out. This week, I'm looking at the board and selecting more for Travis Kelce on receiving yards and more for quarterback passing yards. What I love most, fast, safe withdrawals. When I win, my cash is in my account in as little as 15 minutes. Make sure to check out the promos tab to tail any of the super sweet million winners. Big game lineups. If you tail a lineup that goes 3 for 3, you can win a split of $1 million in promo funds. Here's a special offer for Locked On listeners. Download the app today and use the code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's right, $50 instantly when you play just $5. Prize Picks, run your game. Welcome back to the Blue Friday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. He's Nick Lee. A special thanks to all the 12s that are tuning in. And thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. It is our first dueling mock draft episode of the season. We've gone through the first 4 rounds. And Nick, you and I both have a quarterback that we brought in. I went in the first round with Jackson Dart. You went with Kyle McCord in the 4th round. Who knows where these guys are going to actually go, but I have a very good feeling that Jackson Dart will be in those first 32 picks, potentially in the top 10 in this draft when it's all said and done. Continuing our mock drafts, Nick, we've got 5 selections to go, and this is where championship teams are built. You've got to find quality players in the final 4 rounds, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th. You got to find quality players. Who were you able to nab in your first mock draft here in the last 5 picks, a bunch of comp picks here for the Seahawks in these projections?
Yeah, in the 5th round, we talked about losing Tyler Lockett this year, perhaps. Jalen Noel out of Iowa State. He's got a similar build to Tyler Lockett, maybe a bit bulkier, but not crazy tall, 5'11", 200 pounds. He did a large portion of his damage with Iowa State in the slot. He seems like he's a really good slot receiver. And you add him to the mix with Jackson Smith and Jigba, who's slightly bigger. Maybe you keep DK Metcalf around. I think all 3 do possess different physical traits. I do think that Jalen Noel, just physically and skill set wise, would be a decent replacement for Tyler Lockett. Obviously, legacy wise and performance wise in franchise history, that's kind of rough to say. But Tyler Lockett's one of the best to ever do it in Seattle. But Noel brings a similar skill set, super productive, almost 1,200 yards and 8 touchdowns, 80 catches last year in the Big 12 for Iowa State. So I think he's got the versatility, or he's got the skill set, the route running and production to make it in the NFL.
Yeah, I'm going with the receiver with that pick as well. And it's somebody that I've talked about a lot on this episode. And I'm starting to hear some positives out of Mobile. The first day was quiet. And then you started to hear about Pat Bryant from Illinois. And look, I talked about this earlier this week. I like to look at circumstances when I am evaluating prospects as well. Illinois is a program that runs an old school run-centric offense. They don't take a ton of shots. And yet Patrick Bryant had a phenomenal season this year. He was one of the top receivers in the country with 6 touchdown receptions that traveled more than 20 yards through the air. And he didn't have great quarterback thrown to him either. Patrick Bryant is a really fun prospect and had over 1,000 yards this year, averaged over 18 yards per reception. He brings that explosiveness that Tyler Lockett brought your offense for a long time, and he's got size. He's 6'3", 190 pounds. So Patrick Bryant, I think, would be a really fun pick. And I'm staying with the pass catchers in the 6th round. I don't have the early tight end, but this is a really deep tight end class. And Jake Brenningstone from Clemson, this guy is a glorified receiver that can play the tight end position. He's made some improvements as a blocker. He actually had over 200 inline blocking reps this year for Clemson. He's only 234 pounds. So I don't see him doing that a lot in the NFL. But this guy is a problem stretching the field. You could run those horizontal and vertical routes with him, and he can do a lot of damage. I think that's a guy that could be really fun to pair with A.J. Barner for the future. So I picked Brenningstone. And then my other 2 6th-round picks, I loaded up on some positions that are deeper for the Seahawks. Alfred Collins, who to me was one of the top 5 run-stuffing DTs in college football. Pass rush is kind of hit and miss with him, so I think he could fall into day 3. And LaQuint Allen, look, I posted this on X the other day. I watched LaQuint Allen right after Pete Carroll got the job in Vegas, and I'm thinking, that is a Pete Carroll running back. And the Seahawks still like those kind of guys. He's not the most explosive player, but he is a battering ram, and he is really smooth out of the backfield. The dude has got soft hands. He is a great physical pass protector. You can never have too many running backs. This is where you would pick one. LaQuint Allen would be my last 6th rounder.
For my 6th rounders, I first went with an FCS guy, Isis Waxter out of Villanova, East-West Shrine Game guy. Just because he's an FCS cornerback does not mean he's undersized. 6'2", 215, above average size for an FCS corner. Long limbs, smooth athleticism. He's been a shutdown corner for a long time at Villanova. So you got the true alpha corner with Devin Witherspoon. Reek Wolin still is trying to find his true footing as now a veteran. Then, like I mentioned, with the Seahawks at cornerback, you had Artie Burns go down. You had Trey Brown underperform. You were turning to Josh Jobe, who acquitted himself well. But I think the depth there, Nehemiah Pritchett played sparingly. DJ James, who he drafted last year, is not even on the team anymore. So I think drafting a cornerback is pretty smart. Then round 6, later, Joshua Farmer is a guy who also is making a bit of noise in the Senior Bowl, defensive tackle out of Florida State. So again, like we mentioned earlier, with maybe losing Jaron Reed or even Jonathan Hankins, a guy like Joshua Farmer could step in and be a guy in the middle, 6'3", 318, can play 1 tech, maybe even 3 tech, and get in there. And in the interior, 9 sacks, 15 tackles for loss the last 2 years at Florida State. He's got some good pass rushing traits. And obviously, as a 6th rounder, you're kind of looking for traits. You're not saying, oh, this 6th rounder, just plug and play, Jaron Reed, see you later. That's not how it works in the 6th round. But a guy that possesses those kind of traits like Farmer does, and he might even be there. He's kind of gaining steam as well. Just that DT out of Florida State. And then my last pick for the 6th round. So those 3 picks in the 6th round: Jack Kaiser, linebacker at Notre Dame. And certainly by round 6, you're not looking for the next, Brian Urlacher or Bobby Wagner at linebacker. Maybe a bit of a hedge here in case you do lose Ernest Jones. I still think that's like priority, maybe 1B in the offseason, is try to bring back Ernest Jones at linebacker. Jack Kaiser you could slide him in, and maybe he plays that like John Radigan, Nick Bellore role early on in his career as that steady special teams linebacker reserve guy. But he was a vacuum cleaner at Notre Dame. You watched him a lot in the college football playoff. Led the FBS with 55 solo tackles. So Jack Kaiser's my last pick. So going defensive heavy in the 6th round. Try to find a starter or 2 in there, but I like my 3 picks, guys that all have NFL traits.
Let's get to our Mr. Irrelevant, our 7th rounder. And listen, I don't think this guy would be irrelevant in Seattle, and he'd be coming back home, a Newport High School alum. Jackson Slater, another one of the FCS standouts at the Senior Bowl. There's a lot of murmurs coming out of Mobile that he's probably going to be a center. I'm all for it. Have him be somebody that pushes Oluwatimi at that center spot. This guy gave up 3 pressures this entire season last year. I don't care if you're playing against, 1A high school players. If you play that many games to give up 3 pressures, he was fantastic this year. I think there's starter upside there. I don't even know if he's there in the 7th round because he's done some good things this week in Mobile, but that's a guy, if he's there at that point of the draft, you have a potential home run there. So Jackson Slater adding to that offensive line.
My 7th round pick, we've heard a lot, at least I have, that this is a very, very deep running back class. And
it's the deepest I've ever seen.
Yeah, and that's a sentiment I've been hearing a lot. So I'm going to get into that crap a little bit too. Damian Martinez out of Miami, even if you don't move on from your top 2 running backs, I think he could slide in and compete with Kenny McIntosh there for RB3. Maybe if you do move off of a running back, he could have that RB2 potential. Just uber productive at 2 spots. He ran for almost 1,200 yards at Oregon State in 2023, crossed the 1,000-yard threshold with Miami next to Cam Ward this past year. 232 pounds, dude's a load. And I like his style of running, and I think that if the Seahawks were going to move on from a running back this year, I'm not saying they will, I'm just building depth with Damian Martinez, finding him in the 7th round. This is probably a guy who in some drafts could be a day 2 pick, I think. if the right, running back, or if the wrong running back class was out there and he was one of the better ones. But Damian Martinez in the 7th round, I think, would be a nice get with just how deep a running back class this is. I'm hearing that people are saying that undrafted running backs from this class will probably be significant players down the road in the NFL.
Yeah, it's an incredible class. And I'm just going to throw this out there before we log off for the day. I would put Martinez at fullback. That would be my modern day. The dude is a absolute horse, and he likes to block. He likes to hit people. That is a modern fullback, and I could see Clint Kubiak. He loves two-back sets. Why not make him a fullback at 232 pounds? Let the man go hit some people, and then you could run the ball with him some. There's some fun prospects there for a late-round pick out of Miami. As always, you can follow me on X and Blue Sky at Corbin Smith NFL. You can follow Nick at NickLee51. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On Seahawks on YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcast to make sure you don't miss a single episode. Coming up on Monday, we'll have our post-Senior Bowl thoughts, some takeaways from the big game, and we'll start to transition towards free agency in the NFL. Thanks for listening in and enjoy your weekend. Go Hawks.